Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. This is Vevna Forrow. Yeah, let's get started. All right, guys. So on the past podcast episode, I was talking about my experience of getting into physical bookshop locations and, how I wasn't able to, or what the process basically looked like for me trying to at least. And, locally in Nevada, and then also back in my home state and other places across, the States and Canada. And I tried a couple different, locations and states nearby. But maybe one day. So I want to cover this question. What makes a literary magazine or journal or press even successful? What deems it as being, successful? So I would say that, success is defined differently. And sorry, I have to sit down for a second. You may hear the chair pop or something. But success is perceived differently in everyone's eyes, right? Even in life, I think what a lot of us look at is numbers, right? We gauge things by metrics, stats, and in the lit mag and journal community, for instance, social media accounts, followers, right? Even on Chill Subs, they have you, enter the followers you have, the number of followers you have, and there's like a slider where you can, or input where you can check that, or filter by that. I could be wrong, but that field, there are fields for that, entering the number of followers you have on every single main social media platform, and, the number of subscribers you have, or your reach, your circulation, at Dipity, we don't have, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. We don't have that at all. But I think, it's not all about numbers. I know quite a few publications, not just a few, but a ton, do a very good job, and they don't, really focus on social media, and they don't really do that. They just try to do what they can, and they still, have been around for quite some time. I'm not going to give direct names, but just know that, in the lit mag world and space, it's not all about, your following or, the number of things like that. It's about, your delivery, the execution of the publication, right? You want to make sure that the publication is cohesive and, whether you're a founding editor or not, or a team member on a lit mag journal, it's about how everything comes together. And, success is even just getting an issue out, for the year. I'd say, it's hard to get issues out in the year, to make a complete cohesive issue and to compile everything together. I didn't really think, the first year I started Dipity back in 2022 when we did the first issue, there were a lot of hiccups in it, but I was so, I was, proud of myself. I completed, a first magazine issue, and I ended up doing a reboot of it and cleaning things up. And then I learned from that one and, adjusted the spine text and, 1 through 5, we got through 5 issues. So that was really cool. We did different themed ones. We had the last one, issue 5, was the cat themed. You can still get them, by the way. You can still get those in print if you'd like. I'm not sure if we'll upload them to an archive of some kind too for reading. One of them is available for reading for free, the Antique Road Ship issue, digitally too. And we have a couple other, mixed themed, jumble themed issues prior to that. But Medieval Knights and stuff. So I tried to make the issues fun. And so I think that itself was a success. I didn't really expect to get past issue 1 at the time. I was going through a lot of really painful stuff physically. My left side's pretty screwed up, currently, but I did the best I could, considering everything that was going on in my life. I would say that was successful, because I didn't expect to get past issue 1 that year. I was a really tough year for me on, And then I started rolling out, once I got a layout down, I started rolling out issues. And it takes time to put those together. So that itself is a success. And if you're, not running a print and online publication, getting the publications online, publishing those, that is, and, effectively, some places don't notify you at all, when it's published, and sometimes you just have to, check back. Some places I got published, they didn't notify me, but most did. They told me the anticipated dates, some places, or some didn't, but, so I think being communicative and, giving, I know a lot of places just give a standard, decline letter, or rejection letter, or, they don't really customize it a ton. We do the best we can, at Dipity. We have some detailed feedback windows that are additional outside of our windows, but what I try to do, if a poem gets, in the final round or is close to an acceptance, I try to leave some additional notes. Not on all of them, but on the ones that were very close to an acceptance or that we felt had some fairly good pieces. They just needed a lot of editing, more than just a few minor revisions, and some things that we thought could be, reworked quite a bit. So I try to point out, the faves from the reading team or the strongest poem we felt, there's something to help them. Even if it's just a little tidbit, it's hard to give detailed feedback on every single submission. I know some places do a great job, though, of giving feedback with every single submission, and it's tough. But I think, if you're going to, say you're going to do something, a lot of people say this, make sure you execute on it. If something's going to come up, just make others aware. You want to make others aware as much as possible. You don't want to just ghost people and vanish, right, suddenly. Life events come up and stuff, but just let others know. You can do something. A lot of places, what they do, hiatus post, I see that a lot of times in the Lit Mag journal community. I don't think I'll do a separate episode on what hiatus means, but I think for a lot of places, what that indicates, we see that as like, oh, is the place going to get shut down? Are they closing? Or, what's happening, But sometimes places just take a break, they need a break or have other life events come up. But oftentimes we see places do, close their doors or discontinue the series. But that doesn't always necessarily mean that, again. But sometimes that could indicate, that they are, other things are happening. Some places close for financial reasons, or again, just events, career changes, and they are, or maybe looking for someone else to run the publication. It happens. So some places just say they're taking a break. They don't necessarily use hiatus. They just say we're taking a break for the summer, and then we're coming back. Dipity was on a break briefly, and then for a relaunch and moving to a new submission system and everything. So, I communicated that, but we're not closing. So, again, success is not all about numbers and stuff, but I think it is important to be transparent about, your reader circulation and, your acceptance rates and all of that. The rates that are seen on some directories aren't 100% accurate because not everyone reports them there. So, some places have that on their site and some places don't. We don't have like a metric or stats board at Dipity, but who knows? We may start to do that maybe one day, to have some sort of stats board or something others can refer to. I think it's important to be transparent about numbers. Others, some really do care about, the metrics and the stats behind the publication, reader circulation, subscribers, all of that. And, but again, it's a success just to, I think in total, with Dipity, for example, we've done, somewhere in our online tank, it shows 164 posts, but we don't do individual, we group poems together. So like 2 poems by this poet, 3 poems by that poet. So it's much higher than that. So I think it's like 200 plus, or nearing 300, and we have print that excludes our print publications and other poems and audio series and publications there. So we've done a lot of publications at Dipity Lit Mag and Dipity Press, and considering the budget I was working with and life events, I'd say that was an accomplishment for me personally. But I wouldn't say that Dipity is successful in the eyes of my family or parents at all. I was told, by members of my family that I should shut Dipity down, that it's a complete waste of time, and that it's getting me nowhere. So, it's never a good feeling when, others in your fam say things like that, that you should shut your publication down, and then it's, what's the purpose of it and things like that. I think, again, not everyone understands the world of lit mags and journals or writing and art in general. You have to be really passionate about that. And, yeah. So, but again, I think in my family, a lot of things in terms of success are, in terms of earnings, right? And what you earn from the work you do. Obviously, I think on the flip side of that, I wouldn't say, personally that Dipity is successful in the way I want it to be currently. So I would say Dipity is successful when we get to a point of being able to pay writers for their work, like everyone, and also one day being able to pay our staff. That would be really awesome to accomplish. Being able to pay writers for work. Right now we just have like an annual contest award, which I bumped up, and I've done the best I can to, facilitate that. It was originally $50 for, each round a poet won for our challenge prompt. And now we bumped that up to $100. And of course, some places change their contest awards when, budget cuts happen and things like that. But yeah, this year we bumped it up. So again, I think, if we ever get to a point of being able to pay writers for their acceptances or even chapbooks, we just do in the form of payment 5 copies. But I think it's nice to be able to give poets in advance, on publications and to pay writers for their, poems. I know some publications or the staff, the founders of it pull from their salaries combined. And that's not always ideal, of course. Funding is a huge part of lit mags and journals, being able to stay afloat. We don't have, thousands upon thousands of dollars of funding behind Dipity or anything. It's just me mostly, covering things from time to time. And then, I put a lot of my, I do some projects in the community and stuff for some musicians, artists, and I, used to work in tech and stuff. So, yeah, so I do the best I can. And, trying to look for, projects and additional things to take on to cover things from time to time, but it's hard. Again, I have physical challenges and stuff, so I really do the best I can. And yeah, so yeah, if we ever get to that point, I would say Dipity's successful. It's tough. I know some places are at that point where they are paying writers for their work and are able to offer large cash awards and prizes and things like that, but they also hold contests with fees and things. And I'm just not huge on, hefty fees and amounts and things like that. We do have, when Dipity started, most of our categories were free to submit to the first time, and we barely had any fees. A lot of our, a lot of our expenses was very tough to juggle at that time too. But, I did the best I could. I had to restructure our fee structure and things, and sometimes that happens. You have to change based on, when expenses change and cost. So, we had our submittable bill back then, the site bill. Now we're paying artists for, chapbook art, and that is very costly. Interior illustration work. And yeah, and there's some other fees and stuff that come up from time to time, and with the series and getting that facilitated publication wise, and print test and all of that. So it all adds up. It's there's no way you can have like a publication that has zero fees, or sorry, I mean not zero submission fees. I mean zero in terms of cost to you. It costs money to create a website. It costs money to start something, right? Nothing's entirely free in the world. But I love seeing places that are fee-free, and I wish one day we can go to being fee-free as well at Dipity. I know a lot of people say, the whole reader's fee thing, structure in the world is a scam. And I think it is messed up, to have reader's fees. I'm not a fan of fees. It's always, it's someone's hard-earned money, and, it's not easy for others to do that to, it doesn't matter if it's like $1, $2, or $5, or, $10. It's expensive. It can add up really fast. There was a place, by the way, I think they were called, I can't remember, was it Dollar Tree? But one place had like $1 fee. There are some places that do $1 submission fee, reading fee too. Not a lot of places out there that have $1 to $2 submission reading fees, but I think some totally exist, if I recall. So yeah, it's totally possible to be fee-free. So I would say, if Dipity gets to that point where we, drop off most of our reading fees, we are able to pay writers for their work and also our staff, give them something, for their year of reading, processing submissions, helping out. I think then it would be successful, there's some magazines out there that have a full-fledged staff that's paid and writers are paid for their work and publication, and I think that's really a beautiful setup. So one day I would love to get to that point. I don't know if we'll ever be able to, but I'm definitely going to try. So, and, reading fees, not a huge fan of that. So we had the structure of first-time subs being free for quite some time. Some of our categories still have that, but we've dropped that down, so, so it's tough. Yeah, definitely. Yes, guys. So just an update here. After I recorded this episode, earlier in July, things had changed, and I was taking a number of things in consideration, chats with poets, feedback, things like that, other things I'd come across the community, and calculating things. So I have decided to eliminate all reading fees at just Dipity Lit Mag. We will still have, submission fees at Dipity Press for our chapbook series. That is quite a more costly series to have because, we're paying artists for the cover art and any interior illustrations. And, and then chapbook sales go to the next one and help fund things, right? So, I think in terms of, doing that, having zero reading fees, it really eliminates a wall, a barrier, that is there. So artists, writers, right, they can submit, right, without having that added pressure of a fee or like, oh, I got to get this right or I'm going to lose all my money, right? And then I have to submit again and then I lose more money, right? It's that whole thing, right? Whether it's $1, $5, $10, I've seen fees like that. We all know there are $20 fees, like insanely high fees out there. And even maybe there's some way more than that I've come across too. I can't remember. But those look fishy, though, the ones with super ridiculously high fees. Anyways, so I feel like, no matter what the amount is, right, it's still someone's hard-earned money, right? Every dollar counts, as my dad likes to say, every dollar counts. So I don't like having fees. I don't like doing that. I was always feeling really cruddy about doing that. I'd rather, be able to pay writers their work. We don't have those funds or any significant, financial funding. We're not nonprofit, or anything like that. There are totally lit magazine journals out there, that have successfully, built a support amount, monthly through Patreon or Substack or alternative bonus content and, buy me a coffee or other ways, through merch, through subscriptions of issues and things like that, where they were able to sustain it as a fee-free for several years or decades even, maybe, Some places, of course, have university support or others involved who contribute to it, but we don't have any of that. So, I'm still going to cover things, personally too, as needed. I totally will do that. I've put, when I started Dipity Lit Mag, all of my book sales towards it. I don't have any print book sales or anything like that at the moment, any new publications myself. But, they wiped out my catalog of print books because nothing sold year after year. You have to have a continuous year of sales, to keep it up in the distribution through Blurb. which I did a personal projects through. So yeah, I ended up digitizing all of those. They're pretty random collections, but some of them absolutely I took some time to, you know, share some really meaningful messages, things that actually happened to me. But a lot of them are just for fun, things I did to take my mind off of some, tough events during the pandemic and the some physical pain and things I was going through. Just, you have to keep your mind active. You have to keep doing something, because if you just focus on pain, right, it's going to eat away at you, right? So I try to stay busy and always do something like project-wise. But, yeah, anyways, I have also done, across each year, some design projects for some artists too. And, yeah, so, I always put that towards Dipity, the contest, even some, in the past, like I was awarded something for a poem, right? I put that towards Dipity too. So, yeah, it's tough, being free. There's, I think it removes the pressure off writers, right? And then it puts, I think, a little bit more added, you could say, pressure or stress on the founder, right? To make sure things are, financially covered year after year. And yeah, I think it comes down to just reiterating, reminding others, hey, we have no reading fees. You can support us, leave a tip, leave a donation, buy something, a chapbook instead of a fee, right? Grab something else, I think that whole pay to play thing is really messed up. I think, some places totally, I've said, reasons why lit magazine journals have fees, right, to cover operational costs, to pay their staff, to fund future projects, things like that, to keep the lights on. But some places in existence today, I'm not going to give a list of names out there, but have totally been around fee-free, have done a really good job of generating support around the Lit Mag Journal. And yeah, so, I feel like it just feels icky, right, and messed up, as I mentioned earlier, when you have fees in place, and it makes others very uncomfortable. It's unattractive, right? Writers should be paid for the work. I wish, we could pay our, volunteer readers for their work of reading, combing through, and helping with, giving feedback to poems and things like that. But, we're not at that point yet. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get funded. Maybe things will change, or maybe I'll figure something else out too. But for right now, I do have a plan in place, but it's just going to be one that's it's tight, right? It's going to be tight. No one has an infinite supply of money or anything like that, right? And I was listening to Lyra's Drain My Bank Account song the other day. Oh gosh, I was listening to that song. I was like, I drained my bank account for you, right? Give you all my money, even though it's almost nothing. I feel like that's how poets feel when they're like submitting to lit mags and journals, right? And that was LYRAH. So I feel like writers, poets, artists, when they're submitting place with submission fees, they have that song almost in their mind, or the essence of it, like they feel like they're draining their account, even though it's almost nothing, to try and get published. They're paying fees, and they're racking up all these fees. And, some poets lose like, $200, $300, in the year, or way more than that, all of these fees, $1 here, $5 here, $20 here. Some totally have more than $20 too, which seems really fishy and ridiculously insane, again, to have anything, that high. Most places are just a few bucks, but yeah, I think it's totally doable to do that. You just have to be consistent, whatever you do, like a Patreon or bonus content on a Substack. You have to make it consistent and have subscribers, engaged with the content, right? It's, and reminders, put links to ways to support, the publication and things like that. Sometimes, founding editors have other things that they do project-wise to keep things up and running, like I've done some projects and stuff that I put towards Dipity and everything. So it is, it's a juggling act, right? It is. So it's stressful, and I feel like, removing that stress from writers submitting, I think it's better. It's a more chill atmosphere when there are no fees involved, right? It's just like about writing and focusing on your piece and not worrying about, I I only have this amount of money. Do I submit to these guys? I only have this amount of money. I really don't want to pay a fee. Maybe I shouldn't. And yeah, some writers totally avoid, places that have fees completely, right? And it just is a turnoff, right? To them, it's very off-putting. And yeah, I've seen lists out there that others have maintained of places that have fees, and they're like, don't submit here. These places have fees. Like, it's not necessarily a blacklist, but it's a tracking list, right? Like Chill Subs doesn't have every single lit mag or journal existence to date, right? But some have some writers in the community in the world have extensive Excel spreadsheets list of places that charge fees and ask poets to cough up money. And again, every lit mag journal, as I mentioned just earlier, again, have reasons why they have fees in place to help cover costs and things like that. But I feel like writers can feel like that is just like, you never want others to feel like you're milking them for money. I don't like that. I think it's cool if you're able to have a lit mag or journal or a publication or a publishing house that is, fee free, and you have contests, you have events, you have even maybe workshops, paid workshops instead, doing other things to offset costs, so it's not on writers, right? I don't like that. I know, vanity presses, it's insane, some of the fees and stuff you see out there in existence, and some places have you pay a fee and you never hear back from them, and that's even more messed up, right? Again, it's others' hard-earned money, and you don't, even if it's a few bucks, it matters, right? It matters. You don't want to, have fees in place and then drop the ball, right? I don't like having that pressure fees for writers at all. No walls, no barriers. So I'm going to do my best to maintain this structure, and we're going to go for it and keep it going. Yeah, so, we don't have significant funding. We don't have significant support. It's mostly on me. And, sometimes some poets have totally donated here and there. And yeah, pick things up from our gift shop, stuff like that. So, I just have to keep on top of that stuff, and it's on me. So I think it's worth it, to make sure writers have a space, submission space, they're comfortable without, the hefty, it's like a rock, right? When you see a fee, it's like a rock. It's like an ouch feeling, right? A rock hitting you every time there's a fee, like, ouch, every time you run into that, like, I can't submit there, that's a fee. You see it everywhere. But there are quite a few lit mags and journals out there that are fee-free, it's not, I'm not saying, like, every single place in existence has a fee, right? So, I decided, again, based on feedback and considering things, right? We were on a new submission system again, Subfolio. I will mention, we saw all of our submittable traffic zapped, right? Because we're not on Submittable. A lot of places use that, so they discovered us through there, right? The searching and the filtering, right? As more publications join Subfolio, totally our traffic will pick back up a little bit. And for right now, others find us through other directories and, social media, stuff like that. So yeah, check out our calls if you're interested. Submit to Dipity Lit Mag. There are no reading fees, And so I will do my best to, keep the structure, to maintain it. I don't want to charge fees. I really don't want to. It just feels awful, I know, it's kind of tricky, right? And I forgot to mention this. So, there are other things we can do, right, to offset cost. Poetry feedback, having manuscript review feedback. I saw some places, right, they're fee-free, right? I don't remember the names off the top of my head, but they are fee-free, right? But they have some manuscript feedback. I saw ranges from like, $50 to up to 160 or $180 or something like that, but it was under $200, so 50 to 100 something dollars, in terms of manuscript feedback and stuff, like detailed feedback to poets. So, we can do things like that. We can have, separate buckets. I don't know what the exact cost will be for our manuscript feedback quite yet, but I will, get that finalized. But so, yeah, we'll do poetry feedback. We may do other things, to cover costs, Having fees in front of writers, I think that's a bad experience, and I think it's just very it's not good, you know. It's not a good structure. While it can, keep it may help places, keep the lights on, but I think it's really, you have to really dig deep and get other sources of funding and the flow to support and cover costs, the submission system, and other things. Lots of routes exist, so we're just gonna do as much as possible. I'm gonna try as much as possible, and our reading team's also gonna be involved, and when I say we, in feedback and stuff too. So there'll be like team feedback options, direct feedback from me, and I've done some feedback requests now and then, and put that towards Dipity and stuff. So I've also done free manuscript reviews in the past, not of chapbooks, but just of already existing publications for poets upon request, things like that. But fees are you could say fees are just submission reading fees are disgusting. We'll just leave it as that, right? It leaves a bad taste in your mouth with the Lit Mag or Journal, right? That's constantly asking you to pay a fee every single time. Nickel and diming you is never a good feeling. If you think about, I don't know how much you guys have submitted to Lit Magazine Journals to date, if you're listening. But if you calculate every single thing, if you've submitted to a bunch of places and some of them had fees, or nearly all of them, if you take all of that money, think about what else you could have done with all of that fee, submission reading fee money, right? Think about what other things you could have done with that. It can be costly. It adds up real quick. I know that all too well. When I start submitting to places, you can lose a lot in a week submitting to places, but there are totally fee-free places. So you just got to hunt for them, use the directories again, and search. I'm not saying, places with fees in Lit Magazine Journals aren't, good operations or good Lit Mags or journals. No. Because we at Dipity Lit Mag, right, we had introduced fees and different fee structures, right? First time's free and then changed that again. But I'm not saying it all, but I'm saying it just it feels messed up, right? It should be the other way around, right? Writers getting paid for their work, and then Lit Mags and Journals. Not everyone is fortunate enough to, though, get funding steadily every year, or backed by an organization or university or someone else, So I personally think it's possible. It's just really tough. You have limitations as how much you can do, with your allocated funds, right, for every month and stuff, right? So it's a very small amount, right? And for a lot of Lit Mags and journals that they're working with, if places were to take out, every place in existence today were to take out their reading fees, we'd probably hear about some closures. Submittable for some places is expensive, it can be, and their membership fees, the cost of their websites. Some places do send out contributor copies too, and things like that. So, we're not able to do that. Dipity Lit Mag too. I just have discounted options and stuff, and then but at Dipity Press, I don't think our structure is going to change, but so you'll see that all updated on our site and elsewhere. I contacted all the directories to get that updated. No fees at Dipity Lit Mag. So I think it's going to be a much better overall submission experience. This summer's been kind of sluggish, and also, again, we lost our submittable traffic, so that's obviously, we're going to see a decrease in possibly, or so far, that's what I'm seeing in submission volume. But, so a lot of our traffic was zapped, and it'll take time for us to build that back up in terms of submissions and stuff. But, I was... as you I was setting up Portfolio and stuff and the fees, and then I had gotten, feedback from others, after the, notifying about our relaunch of Dipity Lit Mag and other stuff. And I was like, I just felt really bad about the fees and stuff. We can do fee waiver requests and things like that, but I think just cutting out fees just overall is just so much better. So yeah, I won't go on and on and on about, fees versus no fees and stuff like that. But we all know, fees suck. So yeah, no fees at Dipity Lit Mag as of July 2025. So check out our calls. If you're listening to this, please do so. Yeah, there are quite a few up, and we have online ones, audio, print, and other stuff happening. So give it a check. Check it out. Yeah. Take care, guys. Thanks so much for listening. And one more thing, guys. I know I said thanks, bye, but I just want to tack this on at the very end. So, aside from numbers, there are various award categories, throughout the year for chapbooks, for lit mags, and journals to enter and things like that. Some of those do have, entry fees and things like that, of course, because they use that, for the cash prize or award amount too, right? But, yeah, I mentioned CLMP has, the Firecracker Awards and a few other ones and categories, throughout each year. There are other ones out there. I'm not aware of every single one in existence, for a chapbook, contest and things like that from publishers. But quite a few are out there. So, sometimes, getting that award or being recognized in that manner, it can be noted as a success because, it's a publication that's recognized as, having, you could say all their ducks in a row, right? Everything is quality, right? The publication, the setup, the design, the style, print issue, everything. It's not easy to do so. So I think those events are really nice. I just wish they were all free, right? No fees, right? But, it's understandable, right? Because they want to award a higher cash amount prize and they use that for the contest awards. That it makes sense. But, yeah, there are some, contests and things like nomination events and other things that are, don't necessarily all have fees that, lit mags, journals, editors can enter, poets work in and do things like that. But yeah, there's usually, some sort of price tag in the world for something. I'll share, for example, in terms of podcasts, and maybe I'll cover this in another episode. There are throughout each year awards for podcasts, contests for those. I'm sure you guys have heard of Webby Awards, other things like that in existence, right? So yeah, there were very few that I came across that didn't have any fees attached to them. Some of the contests, are, for those are super high, in my opinion, not just like $20, not just $50, but I saw some that were several $100s for podcast submissions, and show submissions. So it's like, it's way out of my ballpark. It's a great way to support, shows and podcasts, but the entry fees are what I think prevents a lot of shows and hosts, it prevents them from entering those fees, right? Same thing, right? I mentioned submission fees on writer's end, but, founding editors, the team that runs it or whoever's managing and oversee it, right, runs into submission fees too. So I've, entered some awards or contests and events from time to time each year. Last year, nothing but, the regular ones, Best of the Net and Pushcart for nomination events for poets. But, there were times I wanted to enter like the podcast show ones, but the price tag on those entries are just like really too high for me. I did enter a lit mag journal into the Firecracker Awards once. I think it was like, $50-$60. I can't remember exactly, but we didn't win, of course, but I think it's still cool to partake. And yeah, anyways, we're doing a relaunch and a new look. Maybe I'll enter it again at a later point, down the road. We'll see how our budget looks. But yeah, so we run into submission fees too, for contests and things like that, for events, for nominating work. But there are a lot of free nomination events. So, I've seen mostly a lot of podcasts, contests and things like that have fees attached to them. But there are a couple out there, or just one I found that, listeners can nominate the podcast, for, entry, without any fee incurred if it's not the host, or things like that. So, yeah, I think, fees are tough, to juggle. A lot of the contest amounts you see again are, based on, they're using the entry fees to get to that, number, right? To award that money. And so there are some, fee-free contests out there. Again, you can find them by digging through directories and things like that. I came across quite a few on Readsy, that had some fee-free ones, I think, and entry fee ones, and I shared links. Look back at that episode. How do you find, cool literary magazines to submit to and journals, right? I just plugged in a bunch of links beneath that podcast episode and talked about a couple directories and places you can find, where to submit. But, And circling back to something I said, so chill subs, yes. So I do remember they have a filter toggle on, most followers or least followers in the upper right. It's not a drag slider. I mean, it's a filter toggle, to sort by. But yeah, numbers are a huge thing with, tracking stats and stuff in the Lit Mag world. I've seen some sites do a great job of, listing at the bottom all of their subscribers, all of their monthly site visitors, how many poems they've published, everything collectively, all of that data. I know data helps, writers on the front end, is my work, a question that, crosses a lot of writers' mind, is my work going to be seen? How many, are stop by to read publications on this site, or, the print issues, what's the circulation? It's good to have those numbers public, and visible. We don't have all those stats at Dipity mapped out or anything, and we didn't have necessarily, we don't have a print subscription, we have like a digital subscription platform we'd used, and then we're doing the relaunch. So we'll see if we're able to still use, the subscription space we were using, and I talked a little bit about that a couple episodes back. But there are a lot of fees attached in the Lit Mag world, and I hope it changes, over time. I hope it's not always going to be for a lot of places where they're scrambling to come up with funds to cover things. But, I feel comfortable with having no fees. I feel like it's, again, a much better atmosphere and environment for, writers when they go to submit, they don't have that dark cloud hanging over them. Like, I paid this fee. Oh, is it going to be a rejection? Is it going to be a rejection? Oh, no, I don't want to lose that money, I think that whole fear, eliminating that fear, is better, less stress for the writer, so Dipity Lit Mag, July 12th, that's, just note that's when we stopped reading fees, and I'm going to keep you guys updated on how things are going, and, you totally can drop some support. I've plugged in, I used to have a Buy Me a Coffee page, but there's now a coffee, the KO-FI one, right? They always confuse me, but yeah, I had accounts with both of those. I don't think we'll stick with Buy Me a Coffee. We're gonna use the other one, the KO-FI, which is also coffee, I guess. But I think sometimes say Ko-Fi, I thought initially that's, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, there are other ones out there, donation, drop links and stuff. So I will let you guys know about, updates and stuff. You can follow us again and check us out and see if any of the calls interest you. So I just wanted to add that real quick and state that. So, there are a lot of different ways, that success is defined. Personal success is also different for others. If someone, and I'm adding more, I'm adding more here. But, personal success. So, if you're happy with what you do in life, and it's not necessarily $1 million job or anything like that, or $400,000, but you're happy with that, that and your lifestyle, that's successful, right? It's not necessarily someone, saying, and your, family saying, oh, you're not successful because your job pays peanuts. It's not something that earns a bunch of money, right? So they think you're not successful. I've had, personally, I'll share, I've been called like literally every name in the book as, but, and things like that. It's tough, you do the best you can. flop, loser, and things like that. It's hurtful, when others say things like that to you, that, you're not at the point of your life like others, right? Like others comparing you constantly, and you're doing the best you can, despite some things you're going through, right? It could be physically, it could be some events that, were just pretty traumatic, right? We all have, go through very traumatic things in life, and tough obstacles. And I think, it's hard, we all have goals. And for a lot of us, that comes down to numbers, for a lot of magazines, when you're running a magazine, I mentioned numbers aren't the everything. Yeah, that's true. They shouldn't determine your success. It's the quality of your work, the publication, everything. But you have to unfortunately pay attention, to the amount that is earned from print sales and reallocating back into the publication. You have to stay on top of your budgeting, your plan. You have to really gauge that out, and gauge the numbers that you're seeing. You essentially do want to grow, right? And most magazines, that's the goal, right? To grow it, to keep it growing, and to expand it, right? Publications, expanding the series and continuing it, getting to issue number 100, 130, 150, 160, takes time. But yeah, I think, there are a lot of challenges up ahead, and, I'll share those with you guys. But I just do these episodes when I can. So if you're listening again, thanks so much, and take care now, guys. Officially signing off for this episode. Yeah.